Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Jan from ZHN and I'm joined today by Fr Jean Gove.
Hi.
And we're going to be discussing AI, its ethical implications, the moral implications, and all of that fun stuff. So, just to start, could you kindly introduce yourself a bit for us?
Sure, yes. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me.
So my name is Fr Jean Gove. I'm a priest here from Malta. I've been a priest for the past 5 years. But I've also just recently returned from finishing a doctorate in Scotland at the University of St Andrews. So my focus there was on what's called analytic philosophy of mind and philosophy of language, right? So basically, analytic means a particular school of thought, a particular school of philosophy, which kind of relates everything to logic in one shape or other, right? And philosophy of mind and language, specifically, I focused on the relationship that exists between thoughts and words on one side, and the objects that those thoughts and those words are about, right? So we call that reference. So I spent a couple of years finishing a master's, and then the last 3 years and a bit finishing a doctorate. So I've returned back home to Malta. But in the meantime, also, right, because as you said, talking about AI, so where does AI come on all of this, right? So in the course of the last couple of years, while I was doing my doctorate, also kind of realized that a lot of the topics that are discussed within philosophy of mind and within philosophy of language more generally, and even a bit of epistemology and some other areas, are very core questions that are now being asked with the rise of AI, right? So we use certain phrases like ChatGPT, for example, is thinking, or it's confused, or what is it saying, or doesn't know, doesn't understand, right? So we're using all these verbs like knowing, thinking, confused, reasoning, imagining, hallucinating, feeling, right? We're using all these verbs, which we generally refer to what we do, right, as human beings. So what is really going on is, are these AI systems genuinely thinking, or is it just a random sort of computation, right? That's one type of philosophical question. You have other philosophical questions related to reference, as I was referring before, right? So when ChatGPT tells you the cat is on the mat, right? What is it referring to, right? It's referring to the same things we refer to. So these are more maybe abstract, more theoretical questions. But at the same time, also myself being a priest, having studied theology and moral theology and ethics previously here in Malta in my formation to become a priest, kind of naturally, I also delve into or began delving into these kind of more ethical questions, right? Societal questions, kind of the questions, right? I'm assuming we'll be discussing today as well, right? So in the meantime, now I return to Malta. I work a little bit with church schools, helping out church schools to formulate some sort of AI literacy program for children, but also preparing teachers, right, to integrate, to use AI responsibly in the classroom setting. I work a little bit abroad as well with the Vatican's Dicastery for Culture and Education, with COMECE. COMECE is basically the Catholic Church's representative to the European Union institutions. And I still do some research. I work as a research affiliate with the University of Hong Kong, and I teach a little bit both in St. Andrews and at the University of St. Mary's in Twickenham. So a little bit of everything.
You seem to have a lot on your plate, so thank you very much for that. So moving on to the first question now. You mentioned ChatGPT, which probably most of the people listening here have heard of as well. But when we're talking about AI, sort of artificial intelligence in general, when you hear that term, what do you think of? What do you envision AI as? What does that mean to you?
Well, what it means to me would be very different from what it is, right? Maybe, possibly. And I suppose I'll start with the first sentence that any person, right, who asks this question to what is AI will tell you, which is kind of pinning down a definition of what AI is a bit of a risky business, right? In fact, this is also one of the reasons why it's very difficult to legislate on AI, right? Because it's very difficult to find a proper definition of what AI is, right? But basically, if we have to give a very stripped down definition of AI systems, right? What makes a particular system an AI system as opposed to something that is not AI is the particular way in which the computation, the algorithm, the programming takes place, right? Normally, I like to give this example as a very clear, right, stark contrast between something that is AI and something that is not, right? So normally, if you think of a normal calculator that we used to use at school, right, on one side, and a self-driving car on the other side, right? So a calculator gives you the same answers, right, time and again, right? If you ask it 2 times 2, it tells you 4. If you ask it yesterday, today, tomorrow, if you ask it 1,000 times, it tells you 4. And it's planned, it's pre-programmed, it's got this kind of, it's programmed in a certain way to answer the mathematical kind of, right, equations that are posed according to a set predefined set of rules, right? AI is different, right? Think of the self-driving car. The car has to drive in roads that maybe, it was never planned, programmed to drive in conditions that, you can't really program all of them, right? It might be raining on one day, it might be sunny, it might be dark or foggy another day. You might have, an old lady who crosses the street haphazardly, right? So the self-driving car has to be able to navigate all these different situations, right? So it's impossible for us, well, not for me, but for people who actually program, right, self-driving car, to program each and every instance, right, of how the car should react, should move in these different circumstances, right? So it's programmed in such a way which is more probabilistic, right? It kind of extrapolates patterns, kind of recognizes different things, right? There's a basic small set of rules that the system is given, and the system, we use these phrases, right? The system learns. Right, for example, that's one particular part of AI. Right, the system kind of extrapolates through patterns, so kind of recognizes. Right, so AI systems, I suppose, the big thing, right, why AI is causing such a hit, at least recently, right, because AI was with us, has been with us, the term itself since 1956. Right, so much older than us. I think much older than us put together. So the term is very old, right? And the AI has existed, at least the Department of AI here at Malta, at the university, has existed since the 90s, right? But obviously, it's a generative AI, right? This kind of new type of AI that is now not only kind of much better, but at the same time also much more widely available for at least someone like me, right, who hasn't gone to the technical training to do that. So I suppose that would be a very basic, very, very bare bones description of what is AI in this sense, right? So it kind of reasons, again, I use these terms very lightly, right? It reasons a particular way, which is not different than the way previous systems, technological systems, like a calculator would work, right?
So when discussing AI as a technology, what makes it so different from other technologies we've seen before that's revolutionized the way we live, both theoretically and practically?
Well, theoretically, I think kind of basically going back to what we said in the previous question, right? Kind of there are these different ways in which the system works, right? The system computes, right, in a different way. And because there is this openness now for recognizing patterns, right, for a more probabilistic, right, way of reasoning, there are so many more things that we can now do with these tools, right? A calculator was only good for doing one thing only, right? But now think of ChatGPT, right? So the way ChatGPT runs, right, is run by a particular machine, and it works in a certain way by kind of being fed a huge amount of text, right? Basically all of the internet, right? And all the problems that come with that, which maybe we'll discuss, right? It's being fed all of this information, and it's given so many different prompts. You could ask it to write a Shakespearean sonnet on making toast, for example, right? Which is something maybe that nobody has ever written before, right? And by kind of looking at the previous data that it's been given, right, it can kind of piece together, right, what would an answer look like that would satisfy this sort of prompt, right? So the capabilities now that we have with this new technology, as opposed to technology we had before, is so much more, right? And if you think of the way we reason, AI approximates our sort of reasoning a bit more, right, than normal kind of previous technology, which was not kind of did not run on AI, right? Now we have to give like a definition of what, why is it artificial and what is intelligence? These are now very highly philosophical terms, right? There's a wide-ranging debate still going on what exactly is intelligence, right? Is it emotional intelligence? Is it just knowing content, right? Is it applying concepts? Is it thinking about outside the box? Is it problem solving, right? So I suppose we can put those questions to the side and bracket them. And at the very least kind of recognize this, right? So the reason why there's all of this fuss, and at least for laymen, right, for normal people in the street, this fuss all began in November 2022, right, with the launch of the first ChatGPT. But obviously, as I said, right, AI has been here before. But it's only with this kind of new technology that is now much more widely available. So this is the other factor, right? So if we think of the great technological breakthroughs we've had in the past, right, as a civilization, right? So think of the more recent ones, so the internet. If we think of nuclear energy, nuclear power, right? In the past, these technologies were all began in kind of controlled environments, generally by the military, right? And the military is run by a particular state, right? Particular government, right? And then it was slowly kind of put into public use, right? And applied to different things. At the same, on the contrary, rather, today with AI, we have something totally different, right? We have this new technology, but it's not controlled by governments. It's not controlled by the military, right? It's controlled, it's developed, it's pushed by private institutions, by private entities, private businesses, right? So this creates a whole list of more, I suppose, ethical problems, right? Or societal issues, right? About what it can or cannot do, who controls what this new technology, right? Should or should not do, can or cannot do.
So you mentioned that it's become, so the boom has sort of been, because AI has been here for a while, but sort of this generative AI has really come to the forefront in recent years in terms of availability to the common person. And would you say that practically that has, being able to put in a sentence and get a photo, or put in a prompt and get a response, has that practically impacted the way people think and reason and do certain things now in their day-to-day tasks?
Well, I suppose we're jumping right in, right? So I suppose this question could be divided into 12 different questions,
yes.
Right? So first of all, I suppose maybe we should bracket this by saying kind of ChatGPT and similar LLMs, right? Or instead of referring to language, kind of as we mentioned, kind of AI systems that give you an image or a video or a sound or a music clip, right? So that's one type, right? And maybe the more popular types, right, of AI. But obviously we use AI in so many different ways, right? If you're using Siri or Alexa or OK Google, right, you're using AI. If you're using face recognition to unlock your phone, you're using AI. If you open Netflix and it recommends a particular new series, which you absolutely love, right? Or if you're scrolling through TikTok or Facebook or Instagram and you get all these reels, which you really seem to enjoy, right? How does it know, right? How does it know? This is all AI, right? So this is one part, and this already causes some sort of problems, right? In terms of kind of how free are we when using these apps, right? Like Facebook or Instagram, right? Am I being kind of compelled to keep on using the app, right? Through the kind of the algorithms that are employed to keep me there, right? To grab my attention, right? So that's one particular issue there. The issue that you refer to more specifically relates to, for example, using ChatGPT, right? To not do the work that maybe we used to do, right? And you have this question kind of coming up in the context of education. Kids who are, I know, been speaking to some adolescents, right, or youth, university students, right, who say, I use ChatGPT, thank goodness for ChatGPT. I know people who are in the workplace already, who make use of ChatGPT, either from anything to writing an email, to doing up a presentation, to writing a whole report. So there are a lot of questions here. So outrightly, we're definitely not going to say, this is wrong, this is bad, right? We've been using technology to make our life easier since we were able to, put a rock on another rock and create fire, right? And then we made a blade and a knife. And then we had, fast forward, we had the steam engine. So we use technology to make our lives easier, to help us accomplish our goals, and to help us, dedicate more time to the things that are more important for us. Right? Spending time with family, with friends, maybe writing a poem or painting, right? As opposed to going to work and breaking rocks to make a living. So the question here that we have to ask when we're talking about AI is not whether is it good or is it bad to use AI full stop, right? As a question, because that's a very loaded. That's almost a wrong question to ask. So we have to ask, in which context does it make sense to use AI tools, AI systems, right? In which context does it not really make sense? Is it more of a hindrance to us than a help? So in which context in the workplace? I'll leave that up maybe to certain employers to decide. But I suppose we can already begin to draw certain lines, right? So let's take jobs and labor. So we can already decide, for example, and kind of decipher that there are certain instances where certain decisions or certain actions should be taken by a human being as opposed to by a machine, by an AI system. So let me take a very extreme example. So Pope Francis has been talking about the use of autonomous lethal weapons in the war zone, right? So war is obviously very bad, and if we can avoid that, we should avoid that. But what the Pope is saying is, look, if we have to get to a point where a country or a soldier has to decide, to kill another person, that decision should never be taken by a machine, right? That decision to kill, to take the life of a human being, another human being, should never be the result of probability and a set of data, right, and an execution of an algorithm. But so that it should always rely on the moral judgment of a human being, for example. So that's one particular example. We could take other instances where, for example, the human connection and the work that we do is also very important. So take, for example, doctors or people who work in care homes, right? So there's the administrative tasks that doctors have to do in filling out prescriptions, writing discharge letters, and the like. But there is also the other aspect that doctors do, which is talking to patients, hearing them out, explaining to them what needs to be done, empathizing with them, right? This all goes into the healing process that patients undergo to heal from whatever sickness they have, right? So, or take old people who are in care homes. There's one level where you have to remind this person to take the medicine, right? But also there is the human connection of making sure these people feel that they are not alone, they are not suffering from solitude, which is a great problem that we have in this country, especially in the old generation, right? So if we're to use, for example, right, AI robots, to have an AI robot in every room for every old person, it'd be great because we don't need to employ so many care workers, we don't need to employ so many nurses and so many doctors. But is this actually helping us as a society, or is it hindering us? So the argument here is that it's actually hindering us, right? Because we're using technology not in a way to make us more human, but to make us less human. We're locking up people in a room and giving them a robot just to forget about them. Let's take the context of education, right? So is it good or is it bad that students make use of ChatGPT? Again, it depends. Where? What's the context? So if students make use of ChatGPT or any AI tool for them to kind of help them refine their critical thinking skills, fantastic, great. If they're using AI to give them more prompts, more questions for them to work out, right? To help them refine if it's mathematics or English that they're working on, right? Fantastic. But if we're using AI and in the process of this becoming lazy in not understanding certain concepts, right? Of, again, if we're talking about languages, or we're talking about chemistry or biology, we're talking about mathematics, right? In this case, using AI would be a hindrance and not a help. And we don't need to talk about AI. We can also take, again, let's mention the calculator, which you mentioned again already. So we invented the calculator, right? This great miracle. So our parents would tell us that when they were at school to solve trigonometric functions, they had logbooks, they had slide rules, right? And these were very tedious things. Today we have a calculator and we use a calculator to solve these problems. At the same time, though, at school, we still have a portion of mathematics where we have to solve arithmetical questions mentally without the use of a calculator. So what we're saying is, look, use a calculator, but we should still have certain basic skills of arithmetic that we can do unaided by a machine. And the same argument is now extrapolated to AI. What are the skills that we should still have, regardless of the fact that AI systems can do those same things as well, right? Maybe we should still make sure that children in education gain these skills. What are the skills that it doesn't really matter if AI is doing it or not, right? So, and those would be contexts where AI would be great. If we keep on education, for example, in schools we don't only learn, or ideally, hopefully, right, we pray, children don't only learn the content of mathematics, of biology, chemistry, of English and Maltese, but they also learn so many other things. Children in school learn how to share, how to compromise, how to work as a team, how to respect the opinions of others even though they don't agree, how to respect authority, right? How to look after maybe someone in class who needs more help, right? There are all these things which you can't really ask ChatGPT to tell you, how do I learn how to share, These are all things that we can only kind of learn and gain as moral skills through the interaction with other people, through interaction with other students, interaction with our teachers, right? So these would be, for example, skills or contexts wherein it would be almost detrimental to make use of AI tools in these contexts, and it would be best to not make use of such tools, right? So I suppose there's always has to be this reasoning, this process of reasoning that has to go on between what are the skills that this tool would be replacing, right? This particular AI tool, if it's ChatGPT or anything else, what skills is it replacing? Is it okay if we, offload these skills or these processes onto AI? Would it still make sense for us, right, to still maintain these skills, right? So these are some questions to ask. And furthermore, is this maybe a process which cannot be fully completed in a holistic way by an AI system? So think of the doctor example that I gave, right? So just having a screen, an AI screen, right, like an online doctor, an AI doctor, which simply, you feed in your symptoms and it gives you whatever sickness you might have. Is that the full medical process that goes on, or are there deeper kind of levels to it, right? Once again, as I mentioned, kind of the relationship between the doctor and the patient. So in these situations where we see that an AI system, an AI tool cannot fully replicate or fully take over the full procedure, the full process of medicine in this case, or of education, right? If we talk about replacing teachers with AI educators, then it makes sense in those instances not to use AI to offload the whole task, but maybe to offload the administrative tasks or tasks related to brainstorming, right? So it must always be a very context-related process in terms of discerning, thinking, questioning, where would it make sense to implement, to make use of AI tools, and where would it be more harmful than beneficial to make use of such tools.
All right, thank you. So from what I sort of understanding is it's more like with other technology, it's not inherently the technology itself that's the problem, it's the application that we sort of give it. How would you say that currently, locally, AI is affecting maybe Maltese society? I know you gave a few examples earlier that maybe touch upon this already, but if you had to focus really on Malta, how does AI affect the Maltese society today in 2024?
I suppose I could use, I think, a lot of the same examples I already gave. And one of the reasons is because I suppose, we're part of the world, right? So we are experiencing very similar problems, if not the very same problems, actually, right? That are being experienced in different parts of the world. Now, maybe particular aspects are more pronounced than others, right? So I tend to mention, again, tend to stick with these two examples because I think they're very important, very crucial, and also very relevant to our local context, right? Which is the context of education and the context of medicine and care for our elderly, right? Not exactly the same things, but we can group them together, right? So we already know that you have kind of this divide. At least this is from the very minimal, right? So I don't propose or pretend that I've interviewed all the students in Maltese schools, right? But from the few things that a few situations I've been in with some teachers in a number of schools that I visit, as well as talking to students, right, of different ages, I kind of find this great divide between some students who already make use of such tools, and because we do not yet have a sufficient kind of formation of training, maybe don't always use these tools in the best way possible, right, on one end. But you also have a number of students who have no idea what this technology is, right? Especially younger generations, younger students have no idea what they can or cannot do with AI, yeah. So there's, I suppose, a general maybe lack of information. So this is one problem, right? Related to it, you have teachers, educators who would like to give the best for their students, right? Who would like to be on top of things, who recognize that their students are being exposed online or elsewhere or at home to this great variety of tools and possibilities and things that they can or cannot do, right? They would like to make sure that they are teaching in the most effective way possible, but also that they are also teaching properly. Meaning that the students that they teach are actually learning something as opposed to running, back home and answering all the questions with ChatGPT. So I think in education, this could be locally, this is a bit of an issue, right? Recently, the kind of new program for digital literacy came out from the state, for the government. And I suppose there are still some lacunas with regards to AI, right? As I mentioned at the introduction, I'm working closely with church schools. And we're trying to see what we can kind of replicate that's being done abroad that is working in terms of AI literacy for primary school students. secondary school students, but also alongside that, having adequate training for teachers and for parents, right? Parents whose children inevitably will make use of these tools. So that's one aspect, right? So this is maybe, I suppose, a minor project that I'm currently working on. I'm sure there might be other things going on elsewhere, but at least this is our proposal, right, as a church, to try and be proactive in terms of making sure that children, our children of this country, right, are given the adequate tools, the necessary training, to be able to confront adequately and properly, be robust in the face of whatever future challenges they might face. In terms of medicine, and again, I group here kind of the reality that we have of an aging population and so many, right, a sizable number of our elderly population who reside in care homes, right? We already know, this is not a secret, right, that our health services are a bit stretched, and so too is the care that we give to elderly people, right? So crowded old people's homes, not enough local people who are trained, so the need to bring in foreign professionals to help out, right, to work in this sector. So you already have some issues there already, right? So a tool, whatever tools AI might afford, might immediately be seen as being very attractive, great tools, right, to satisfy this problem, to resolve these problems, right, of shortage of labor, shortage of space, right, and all these problems. And again, here we should be careful, right? We already had, for example, not exactly related to AI, right? Not exactly related to AI, but I suppose a similar analogous problem, right? We had the case a couple of months, or not years ago, of the individual who kind of left sandwiches the hole, right? And there was a lapse in the security and the care there, right? And there was this proposal that we should therefore maybe tag old people, right? Tie them up with an air tag or some sort of GPS, right? So they won't get lost, right? So again, technologically, this is a great solution, right? You're using technology to make sure you have, you don't lose any more old people. Fantastic. But at the same time, there are these other questions, right? What does this tell us about the dignity, the way that we are treating elderly people, right? What does this tell us about the way we're treating elderly, this older generation? But also, what does that do to the rest of society? What are we saying? What message are we giving if we treat, a particular portion of society in a particular way, right? If you stop working, or if you stop producing, or stop contributing to the economy of this country, you're not really worth anything, right? You just wait until you pass away and you're no longer a problem, right? Now, this might sound a bit extreme, but this is the attitude taken in maybe some other countries. Thankfully, here in Malta, we still have, strong family ties, which are very important for us to care for our elderly, right? But we're already seeing cases of individuals who are abandoned by the rest of the family, right? And the state has to bear the responsibility there, right? How do we make sure that we are using technology, using here in particular, because we're talking about AI, using AI in a responsible way that is helpful to us, but at the same time is not denigrating, right, the dignity of these individuals, and at the same time not giving a wider societal message about the value or lack of different people depending on their status or their position in society.
So you mentioned a bit these societal issues, and that was actually going to be my next question, sort of, how can this technology help deal with these societal issues locally? Now, you already mentioned, obviously, that maybe the technology is there, but there's the ethical question, the moral question, should this be done in the instance of elderly people? But are there, you think, any other sort of scenarios where this technology, AI in particular, does have a use case? So if there's an issue, it can help with, and it should be implemented.
Yes, of course. I mean, again, even in these circumstances that I mentioned of education or the healthcare system, right? I think the question that we have to ask here are, what are those tasks that are carried out repetitively, that are maybe purely administrative, for example, right? These are tasks that could be very easily handed over to AI, right? There was this very fantastic meme online, right? So I won't take credit for it, right? But somebody said we're using AI to write poetry and to draw paintings. And I'm here still doing the dishes, doing the laundry, right? I want AI that can do the laundry and do the dishes so that I can dedicate my time to writing poetry and painting pictures, right? So what does this mean? What do we mean by this? We're supposed to use AI to help us flourish, right? So we use AI for those mundane, menial tasks that maybe, can be offloaded to machine in order for us to enjoy, again, those things that are of value. So relationships with our loved ones, spending time doing the creative endeavors that we would like to enjoy doing, right? So I think you can implement these in so many different kind of aspects of society, be it in different areas of work, but also personally, right, to alleviate maybe some of the burdens that we have in our day-to-day. In order for us to kind of recognize what are those aspects where we can use AI in a beneficial way, right? And there are many of them, right? I suppose the argument here is always this. It's always making sure that we use it in the appropriate place and the appropriate kind of context, right? So, for example, one of the risks we have here is, given that AI runs on algorithms, right? Algorithms runs on numbers, right? So there's a question of data. The risk here always is that we are reducing individuals to a set of numbers, right? To data, right? That you are treated not on the basis of who you are as a human being, as a person, right? With your inherent dignity, but you are a number on a sheet in a matrix, right? And this is what we should be aware of. So I think there are so many other areas. I think, for example, in terms of governance, for example, in terms of the bureaucratic processes that we have to go through that could be alleviated and made more efficient by the use of AI. These would be great cases, right? Think of maybe certain areas of, once again, as I mentioned, right, certain administrative tasks related to a variety of works, from accountancy to education and medicine, which we've mentioned already, to secretarial work, I think we are then only limited by our imagination. There are also other areas, right? So think also of those areas where processes were very time consuming. So one of the great success stories of AI is AlphaFold. So AlphaFold is a particular AI program, right? So one of the big problems that we had in biology is the protein folding problem, right? So in order to make vaccines and medicines, we need to understand how proteins work. Proteins are these very, 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 very long strands which fold in meticulous, kind of really complex ways, right? And proteins do what they do because of the way that they're folded. So before we had AI, you had so many different scientists thinking about how does this protein fold, how does it work, what does it function, etc. Right? And this took so much time, which meant that it took so much time for us to come to create vaccines or medicine. With AlphaFold, right, because it can compute so many computations very quickly, right, over compress what so many different scientists had to do over a long set of time very quickly. We now have solved this protein folding problem, right? So this is another great example. We're using AI to perform very long and hard calculations to allow us to move forward with progressing in medicine, right? So this is another fantastic use of using AI, for example, in research in this case. So there are great examples of use, of beneficial, positive uses of AI that we can think of. Again, and we are only limited by our imagination. As long as we keep this kind of discerning mentality, reflective thought process kind of at the back of our minds when we're doing kind of implementing AI in different contexts.
So we've gone over now a bit sort of the concerns when considering the use of AI, the actual practical and beneficial applications of AI. How should people who maybe, like you said, there's a wide range of people who are familiar with the software and some who have no clue about it. These people who don't have the experience or the knowledge on how to properly utilize this technology, there's this sense of fear maybe that they're going to lose their jobs. How can we ensure sort of that nobody is left behind in this regard?
Making sure nobody is left behind is a massive challenge. It's a duty, but a massive challenge. And once again, we've put AI to the side. We can see what happened during the pandemic, right? We had schools which were closed, and we recognized that there was this digital divide between children, students who had access to devices that they could use, and students who did not have, right? So this is one example of having people left behind, right? So this is a problem that this boils down to issues related to inequality, right? Systemic inequalities, societal inequalities, which have existed long before AI. The risk now is that AI will exacerbate these problems, right? And this is what we should be aware of. We should be wary of these realities where the divide between those who have and those who do not have increases rather than decreases, right? And unfortunately, without being a kind of maybe too much of a warrior, right? We have seen this story act itself out in the past. We have seen different technologies being presented to us as tools which will now level the playing field, make us all equal, right? Be used to bring peace and prosperity to all. And instead they have been utilized by those who have, the rich and the powerful, those in power, against those who either do not have a voice, those who are weak, or those who are poor financially or otherwise, right? So this is a tale as old as time. So we should be aware of this. So one main way that this is done is through legislation, so that we as common citizens make sure that our elected representatives, right, make sure that they are legislating in order to safeguard those who are most in need. To safeguard us, for example, against these big, massive corporations who have the money, the technology, and the will, right, to exploit whoever for profit, right, at the risk of whatever consequence might arise. So one thing that we should all do is ensure that we are legislating. So far, the only legislation, dare I say, that exists in the world, right, I might be being a bit too blanket statement, but there is some truth to this, is by the European Union, right? The EU passed the AI Act, which came into force on 1st of August, right? So not too long ago. Locally, there is this process, right, which the EU kind of enforces that within a number of years, individual countries also adopt something similar to the AI Act, right? So far, I haven't heard of anything so far, but I would imagine this would be coming through, right? But the AI Act is not perfect, right? The AI Act only limits, kind of classifies different uses of AI from high risk to prohibited uses to medium risk to low risk, and does only that, right? It doesn't really delve into much more detail. This hopefully will come further on. So that's one thing that we should do, kind of make sure, pressure our elected officials to make sure that they are legislating in favor of us, right? And not to have this kind of free-for-all of companies who use AI indiscriminately for whatever desire they might have. So that's one thing. I think the other is also our own personal education and formation on these issues, right? To keep ourselves abreast. Now, you don't need to read the technical manual, right, of ChatGPT, right? Nobody does, I think. Well, I don't. I don't think I should say that, but anyway. Yes, but at least I think whenever you're going to use a particular AI tool, for example, to recognize maybe or look around or kind of try and think, what is this tool using, right? If I'm feeding it data, is it retaining that data, right? Is it retaining information about myself, right? Or to what degree is my privacy being respected or not respected? These are very basic, right, examples. There is also another issue, which maybe is a bit tangential but related, right? The environmental impact that these tools have, right? These tools are not, don't fall from heaven, right? They use massive amounts of electricity, massive amounts of water, right? So there's this particular aspect for us to get informed on what is going on here. And I think, I suppose, more generally, to recognize at least that when I am engaging with an AI tool, to kind of have in mind the big picture, right? If I'm being prompted a suggestion, is the suggestion impartial? Is the suggestion based on the interests of a particular company or based on my own interests, right? So to always be wary that when an AI system, for example, is suggesting information to you, be it in terms of recommendation on Netflix, for example, or anything from the text that ChatGPT tells you, right? To not rely on that blindly as if I'm relying on a human being, right? Because at the moment, the way these tools are presented, they are presented as if you can rely on them in the same way, right? I mean, this is philosophically issues related to what we call the epistemology of testimony, right? Which is another issue altogether. But I'm supposed to be aware, right, that this is a machine, this is a tool that is, in and of itself, so far, has no sense of innate reasoning. So we should treat it as such, right, as a tool. We should also recognize that this tool is being created, made, employed by particular corporations, individuals, and businesses that have their own interests, which might not necessarily always coincide with mine, right? So I think to always be wary, just to be on the lookout, and not to be complacent in our using of such tools, to use them, but to use them responsibly. Not only in the context that we're using them, which we've said kind of previously, but also to recognize how should I keep myself safe, right? in using this tool? What information should I offer? How should I use it, right? What data is it collecting? And these kind of similar questions that we should ask when using such tools.
All right, so across this episode, we've sort of discussed the different technologies, the risks, the use cases, kind of society and how it affects them. So for the last question, I want to put you on the spot here. And if you had to prepare two roadmaps, one for the Prime Minister and one for an average young person, about how to best prepare for the societal shifts being brought about by AI, what would the main points be?
Okay, so I think let's start with the average person, right? The average person who might be, our age or about to begin, right, finishing studies and beginning work, for example, right? So the first, I think, is to be informed, to stay informed, right? At least not necessarily on the latest technological developments that are going on, but at least on which tools are being employed in areas that affect me directly, be it affect me societally, right? Maybe that the state or healthcare systems are using, but also that affect me, for example, in the particular area of the economy that I'm working in. So that's one thing, to be informed. Secondly is to make sure that I am as skilled as possible, right? So in the job market, we speak about reskilling workers or upskilling workers, right? So what are the skills that I have? How can I kind of train myself, right? Further my education and my training in order to ensure that I have the relative skills to be able to, first of all, kind of make sure that my job is not something so far that can be taken over by AI, but also to recognize the kind of deficiencies or inadequacies that currently exist in these AI tools, right? To be able to pick out where the tool goes wrong, right? And the tool that you have to know a bit more, right, in terms of the manipulation of concepts of which particular area of your job is. I suppose those would be the two main things. And the third one will bring us to the other roadmap, right? Activism, right? So once again, kind of make sure that our elected officials are kind of on the ball, right? And making sure that my rights as a citizen are protected, right? My fundamental rights, but also rights related to my right to privacy, right to be forgotten, my right related to, for example, making sure certain decisions are taken by a human agent and not by an AI agent, right? The certain consumer rights, for example, that are respected, right? So I think those would be the three things. So stay informed, to make sure you're skilled and to seek further education whenever possible in the particular sphere that you're in, and to advocate. That would be, I think, the very quick 3 points, right? For the Prime Minister, what would I tell the Prime Minister? I don't know. No, I don't know. I suppose I don't know in the sense of where to begin, right? Prime Minister has to look after the whole country. So I would tell the Prime Minister, first of all, definitely education, right? Making sure that tomorrow's society, tomorrow's country, right? The children of the adults of tomorrow are well equipped, first of all, to safeguard themselves from being abused, right? From being taken for a ride, from kind of falling behind in the revolution that will happen here, but also in making sure also that we are on the ball in remaining at the forefront, remaining competent, remaining adequate in the labor market, but also in a more holistic fashion, right? Secondly, I think more on a societal level, right? So this is across the board, to make sure that we recognize that we are using AI to help us flourish as a society, right? This is what we want, right? We've seen so many mistakes come about through a narrow-minded approach of only increasing economic output and economic activity, right? Today, so many people are complaining about the state of the environment, about a lack of happiness overall, an increase in mental illnesses, right? So we're doing fantastically well, economically speaking, but we're lagging behind in these other aspects, right? If we are employing AI, making use of AI only with the main goal of increasing the economy, right, of making sure we prosper financially, we will be doomed. There is no two ways about this, right? So if we make sure we are using AI to alleviate certain burdens, but at the same time to keep in mind this one main goal, how will we flourish as a society? How will we make sure that whoever lives in this country is happy, right? Lives a life worth living, right? And AI has the potential of either making this dream a reality or taking us in the completely opposite way. So I think if it's in governance and both locally and nationally, if it's in areas related to the economy, decisions related to the economy, decisions related to healthcare, decisions related to the construction and the environment, all these different aspects and facets, right, that the Prime Minister and his team have to deal with, right, this question has to remain central. What decisions must be taken, or which decisions should we take in order to ensure the flourishing of this society, of individuals individually, but also of us as a community, right? And this, yes, I think this is it's not really a roadmap, it's more of, I suppose, a principle, a guiding principle, right? Of ensuring that the flourishing of us as a society is kept at the center, right? And not have a narrow-minded approach, only focusing on economic output or economic gain. Because this will come at so much of greater cost that it will be the opposite of progress.
Fr Gove, thank you so much for joining us today. That's all the questions I have for you. Thank you to everyone for listening and watching. Stay tuned to our socials for more discussions similar to this. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Fr Gove, once again.
Thank you.